Perfect. So welcome to all of you. It is a very fall day on this Wednesday in Portland, Oregon. It is just in the last few days, we have had brilliant, brilliant color. I have right out my window, 100-year-old, huge vine maple. Huge, and it is burst into red, burst into orange and yellow. I love this time of year because our city is so beautiful. And I have been in Ohio at the same period of time, a little bit later, and you have the same beautiful color. So we are having two sessions on vocabulary. We have talked about the big ideas of explicit instruction, which we'll continue to reinforce. We have talked about the design of instruction, the opening, the body, the close to a lesson, how to teach strategies. We've had a video already on vocabulary in our first session. And our last two sessions were on delivery, opportunities to respond, and that sequence we follow in instruction where we have input, we ask for a response, an opportunity to respond. We monitor those responses and give feedback. But the team, that is the cooperative team between your districts, said one of the things our teachers are saying is that our students are low in vocabulary and we need to make that a very intentional focus. So we're going to focus on vocabulary in two series. When we look at vocabulary, this is useful for us to keep in mind that vocabulary isn't just learning the meaning of a word. It goes beyond that. So with yourself muted, but you're talking out loud, so we have overt responses, I want you to read this with me and begin. Vocabulary knowledge is knowledge. The knowledge of a word not only implies a definition, but also implies how that word fits into the world. Probably one of the greatest vocabulary researchers, the late Steve Stahl. So here's our topics for today. Now, I know that you were probably thinking, okay, she's going to cover how to select vocabulary for explicit instruction, how to word the definitions, how to give examples, how to have practice on it, how to include teaching the morphographs in the words. And you'd be right for session 2, but not session 1. I want to broaden our vision of vocabulary. And so we're going to look at some facts about words. Why is vocabulary instruction so important, which you already have an idea, like reading comprehension? And what would make a total vocabulary program at your school site so that you could really dive deeper into it than just the importance of explicit and teaching of vocabulary, but there's more to it. So today, what we're going to look at are those parts of those components of a vocabulary program that are incidental but intentional. Incidental but intentional. And for example, what is the language we're using with our students? Is it propelling them to higher vocabulary? Are we consistently using academic vocabulary? Not talking about the top and bottom number, but the numerator and the denominator. Are we doing read alouds, which is one of the most critical aspects of kindergarten, first and second grade, even beyond, of reading to students, so that students are using that as a propelling force to improve their vocabulary. And so thus are we teaching vocabulary embedded in those read alouds. And incidental but intentional, are we teaching you word learning strategies? And do we encourage independent reading but outside of school site? Because inside school site, we are with the kids a limited amount of time, we are experts, and we need to use as much of that time for instruction. but we need to have kids taking home books and reading books and sharing them with the class and being in book clubs so we can promote independent reading. These are intentional. We will only improve them intentionally, but they are also incidental versus next time when we look at the intentional teaching of vocabulary. So get ready for a big day. You're going to participate, but you need at least 2 pieces of paper next to you. And on one of them, at the top, you're going to write best practices. So you can say, oh, that's an aha moment. I need to do that. Oh, I can do that. I need to talk to my 5th grade teachers about that. I need to talk about my 1st grade teachers about that. So I want you to write down sort of your personal to-do list. But today you need an extra piece of paper because sometimes I'm going to have you write down answers and I'm going to give you time to think about it, but I'm going to randomly call on people. Yep, I'm going to randomly call on people. You'll open up your camera, you'll open up your voice, and you'll answer questions. All right, but I'll give you preparation time for sure. So a few facts about words. Now I want you to think, got that extra note taking just for scratch notes? As we look at these, I want you to think of, well, if that is true, this is what we'd have to do. If that is true, this is what we'd have to do. So you're going to make a quick note of any conclusions that you might make concerning instructional practice on vocabulary. Okay, interesting facts about words in English. Number 1, and read it with me, English has more than 1 million words. Now, this is a challenge. It has significantly more words than, let's say, Russian or Spanish. And it is both a bonus to our language, to us as English speakers, because it allows specificity so that we can say, this is a beautiful day, but we could use many, many different words for beautiful. I am very happy, but there's so many words I could use for that. So the specificity is the gift of English. It is, however, a language that not one of us are going to know all those million words before we leave this planet. So it makes it very difficult as a second language and as an immigrant language or a school language. And read it with me. We cannot teach all million words. No, we do not have enough time to teach all million words, even in the 12 years of schooling or beyond. But we have to then be certain that we're teaching students ways to figure out the meaning of their own words. So we have to be certain that they can self-generalize, that they can generalize strategies to other words, that they can generalize words to other words. Now, this one's really important, and read it with me. All students are English language learners. Yes, you might have a sprinkling of students who are learning an additional language, which is English. But I don't care what students are in front of you, they're English language learners. You are an English language learner. I am an English language learner. I have not yet mastered all million words. So we have to be aware that as we use language, that we might have to support the students so that they would be just surrounded with English. And very critical to know, based on the background knowledge of students, that the kids sitting in your classrooms, that some of them will have as an average that they learn per day 2 words, and sitting in the same class with the same teacher, with the same instruction, with the same things they read, others will learn 8 words, totally based on the language that they bring to your class, the background knowledge that they bring to their class. Basically, it's a perfect example of the more you have, the more you learn. So scaffolding has to be in place so that we can accelerate beyond this slow growth, so that the students from the get-go back in preschool, they are flooded with language so that they have more background knowledge, more English language to connect it to. And this is a sobering thing if we think about it. By the end of high school, college-ready students will need to acquire about 80,000 words. You can just sort of picture your class and say, whoa, I have some students who are not yet on that path, but I want them to have the option of going to higher education. We've got to flood them with vocabulary. And this one you would figure out on your own, that words have differential need in terms of instruction. That if I was teaching glacier, here is a glacier, probably one of the last glaciers. It is concrete, and thus the term is learned quite easily. On the other hand, the term altruism, the willingness to give up yourself for others, is a word that's not concrete. And so it takes more effort to teach words that do not have a concrete reference. And in English, we must, if we want students to generalize, constantly emphasize the relationship of words. Relate, related, relates, relating, relation, relatedness, interrelated, interrelation, correlate, relationship, interrelationship, age-related. I'm trying to defy this last one, age-related. And so, but teaching words and introducing students to the family of words, particularly the relatives that are close. And so if I was teaching relate, I would teach related, relates, relating, relation, and I would be certain to teach that much to elementary students, if not beyond that. In fact, 8. We're going to use this term today, and that is words make up knowledge networks. And so this is, to me, if you read the research right now on vocabulary, this is one of the key concepts of teaching students vocabulary as it relates to it relates to knowledge networks. Okay, so here the students are reading about our Earth, and they're reading about the land of Earth and water. And these were the concepts that were introduced in that reading. So on the land, that we're living on land, both people and mammals. And in the material, they talk about different landforms, from ones that are related to water, shore, bank, island, meadow, mountain, valley, to land words like landscape, and key concepts. Some of the earth is land. Over here is water, with the other concept, most of the earth is water. But teaching these knowledge networks is how we actually process bodies of knowledge. Your brain is full of knowledge networks. Now you've made connections between concepts and words and big ideas, and even representing it visually has very good research. Well, number 10, or number 9, forgive me, and read it with me. Numerous instructional approaches and activities must be utilized to optimize vocabulary gains. So that's what our goal is the next 2 times we meet, is numerous instructional approaches in order to have optimum vocabulary gains. All right, so you were asked to think about a fact and then draw one conclusion that concerns vocabulary instructional practices. My turn to think about it. So I'm going to use this one. Words make up knowledge networks. Well, if I wanted students to make up knowledge networks in the primary grades, which we'll see today, then I would want to have read-alouds that would cover a body of knowledge. So we're going to look at units that we might teach. For example, I have one right here that I did with a school in Nebraska, where we picked out topics that were related for read-alouds. And this one was on birds. And we had a book on owls, a book on details about birds, a book about ducks and eagles, and tropical birds, and other things that are mysterious birds at night in terms of owls, and then how parrots could be trained. By the time we were done, the kids were bird experts and they had fantastic vocabulary. So one of my conclusions is that students should be taught knowledge networks. All right, think of one conclusion. And if you don't have one in mind, when I call on you, you are welcome to call on a pal. So Michelle, would you open up? Lovey? And we're going to do 3 conclusions. And Michelle, taking one of these facts, what is your conclusion?
Let me look just a second. I'm not quite ready yet.
Okay,
Can I take a pass and you come back to me?
I absolutely can. Tabitha, do you have one in mind?
Yeah, I wrote down with fact number 9, the numerous instructional approaches, that it's not just one and done is my conclusion. We have to keep returning back to it, which has been, with your repeated directions, it's just like that with vocabulary. It has to be repeated.
Beautiful, excellent. And Anne, do you have one? We're just going to listen to 3, so give us your best shot.
All right, I chose fact number 5. By the end of high school, college-ready students will need to acquire about 80,000 words. So that means we need to constantly be introducing students to new vocabulary, probably a lot of read-alouds and pulling from the text that we're working on in class.
Absolutely. And I'm still rooting for us to have free community college. We should make college like in other places, like in Australia and all over Europe, not cost individual money at this same level. But 80,000 words, at least they have an option. All right, and back to Michelle.
The one about you can't teach a million words. You have to teach some morphology of words so that everybody can have prefixes, suffixes, and we better understand all words that way instead of teaching 1 million words, having connections.
Perfect. Excellent job. So pretty interesting facts to keep in mind as we leap on 2 sessions on vocabulary. So, we can easily think of why vocabulary is so important. But just thinking about it in terms of language, if I want to understand what I hear, I'm going to have vocabulary. And if I want to understand what I read, I'm going to have vocabulary. So in terms of my receptive language, I need vocabulary. And I also need expressive language. If I want to communicate in writing, which I'm working on some books right now, I'd better have the language that clearly communicates it so that teachers reading that books will get the total idea. And I need it in speaking today. So it is a seminal part of our receptive and our expressive language. Seminal meaning important. But children come together, and we should realize this, with very different vocabulary levels when they enter our school. And I know from talking to the team in charge of this training that you have a range of social economic levels within your schools, and thus you would have a range in terms of vocabulary. But look at it at age 4. Already, based on social economic background, students have significant differences in vocabulary. So if you're a parent, by 4, your children have a lexicon of about more than 1,000 words. And students in families that have lower income supporting them, and probably one reason is their parents are out at 2 different jobs so that they are less having vocabulary around or fewer books read to them, but they averaged about 500 words in their lexicon. So even before we meet them, there's differences, which would tell us, oh my goodness, if I want equity for these students, I have got to optimize their vocabulary gains and reduce the gap. And this data that was collected in Kansas also showed that if we looked over time and the number of words that students would hear in their environment would be quite different. And so if you're in a family with professional parents, you hear more words. You hear many more words in a week. You hear many, many, many more words in a year. And in 3 years, we have a huge difference of 20 million word difference for the students. So this to me is a rallying call for us in every elementary school, and yours are no exception, to be certain we're optimizing growth in vocabulary. So this vocabulary gap has been validated by many many researchers. For example, in a study that Louisa Moats did, she looked at first graders, and we have some first grade teachers with us, and she also found that difference with students that she called linguistically rich, having about 20,000 words in their lexicon as they come into first grade, and students that she referred to as linguistically poor had about 5,000 words. So look at that range. That is like a huge range. Now, can we close it? Probably we can't close it altogether. Why? Because those first graders that already have this difference have the same environment in second and third and fourth and fifth grade, difference environment. But through our intentional teaching, we can reduce it. And then we can get the students so that they have plenty of vocabulary to go to trade school, to go to university, to go to college, where they can expand their own vocabulary. And so this is just another study by Michael Graves, that also showed the same thing, the differential based on social economic status. And it goes right from the elementary grades into the higher grades. And
we're all on them.
Okay, thank you. I better just stop and tell Annette closes off her audio. And if you can keep a watch on that and help people mute, that would be cool. Thanks so much. So the second point, though, is really important too, in that when we look at the vocabulary gap, it is particularly a wide gap if you are a struggling reader versus proficient readers, because much of the vocabulary that is gained in elementary school in third, fourth, and fifth grade is gained by you reading. And so if I'm a struggling student, it's laborious for me to read, I'm not leaping on reading, then we're going to have a difference. So thank you, Annette, for muting. Appreciate that. And this is how we've often summarized this. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And we have to do better than that. where the rich get richer and the poor get richer also. All right, so in the primary grades, the achievement gap between socioeconomic group is a language gap. And for English language learners, their achievement gap is based on vocabulary. All reasons why we need to be very, very dedicated to making vocabulary an emphasis at our elementary schools. And one of the ways that it affects children is in terms of receptive language is I can't comprehend unless I know the meaning of words. So reading this with me and go. Indeed, one of the most enduring findings in reading research is the extent to which students' vocabulary knowledge relates to their reading comprehension. You want to improve comprehension, a goal of all of your school districts. Well, one of the paths to doing that is to increase vocabulary. Now, do you need to know every single word to have comprehension? Most studies have shown that you need to know at least 90 to 95%. Now, even in your life, it depends on what you're reading. If you're reading narrative and you're getting the flow of the plot and there's a few words you don't understand, you usually still get the big idea. Over here in informational text, if you do not know the meaning of critical words, you probably will not have comprehension of it. So there is, in informational text, a need to have a little fuller vocabulary than with narrative. So what, if I came to your school, what I look for in terms of vocabulary programs? So get ready to sort of check these off. Number one, well, not quite yet. So here we have check to be certain yet you're muted. So thank you so much.
Dr. Archer, you're muted now.
How's that? Thank you, thank you. That would be very, Loretta, we just so appreciate you because having me muted would have reduced the quality of this webinar. Thank you. Okay, so flood and few. So as I read, I have more than 50 books in my library on vocabulary. And so for a number of different webinars, I've been reading about vocabulary. And there seem to be two philosophies, and we're going to go with both of them. One of them is flood. So reading it with me and go. In settings where literacy achievement is going well, teachers flood the classroom with vocabulary and vocabulary instruction. Flood it. But there's also the view about a few. Reading it with me. To develop vocabulary intentionally, students should be explicitly taught both specific words and word learning strategies. So the only schools that I've been working with that have made a huge gains in comprehension have made huge gains in vocabulary, and they've done it by both of these, flooding and few. So today we're going to particularly talk about flooding, and next time we're going to talk about few, where we expressly teach words in art class or in math or in science or in social studies. Okay, so these are the actual components. If we add them up, that should be in an elementary school vocabulary program. Number one, we're going to look at is using high quality language and intentionally, but incidentally. So I was in a kindergarten class where the teacher said, eyes up here, we are going to assemble. We are going to gather and go to the rug. And she said afterwards, I said, do you always use the word assemble? She said, I am trying to use my highest language with students consistently so that they are adding all the time to their understanding of vocabulary. So high quality. In fact, in the schools where I'm working, we often put up signs to remind us of this. For example, in one district at the back of the room, we had college vocabulary. So the teacher saw it all day long and said, oh, I should use some higher vocabulary, higher vocabulary, higher vocabulary. The next one you're all working on right now, and that is to use academic language. We really gave an example. Instead of talking about the top number and the bottom number, we could add the academic language of numerator and denominator. And read alouds. You see, those, particularly the people who teach kindergarten, first, second, even third grade, much of the vocabulary that could be added to children's repertoire would be embedded in read alouds. I'll just tell you one study that caught my eye on read alouds. So in this study, they compared the vocabulary in common read alouds read in pre-K, kindergarten, first, second, and third grade with the vocabulary of professionals at lunch. So they put down a recording device with attorneys gathering together, with teachers in the teacher's lounge, with physicians, with surgeons, and they analyzed their vocabulary and found that the vocabulary in read alouds is significantly higher than the vocabulary utilized by professionals. In other words, read alouds, well chosen, can be excellent tools for increasing vocabulary. Well, we also want to teach word learning strategies. On our very second day, I infused in the handout my favorite word learning strategy called Inside Outside, but today we'll explore it a little more. And then getting students to read a lot outside of class makes a difference. And then our topic of next time is, what do we know about the explicit instruction of vocabulary? Selection of the words, choosing definitions, introducing examples and non-examples, everything about teaching explicit words. So if you are a principal, you should be looking at this and saying, which parts of this are we not doing with intentionality that we need to upgrade? And coaches and teachers, and when you sit down next time with your grade level, look at this list and say, where should we put our energy? So we're going to start with high quality language. And this is, you need some kind of visual reminder, like words, 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 words. Put up that sign in the back of your room so you're looking at it, so you remember, okay, I need to use my highest vocabulary with my students, and pair in the definition and pair in the meaning of the word. So we know this makes a difference. This is the interesting thing about the language of the teacher in a classroom. They were able to record lessons of the teacher teaching across elementary grades, and doing that over time, then determining the language the teacher uses. And then later, when they test the students on their own language, they found almost a total prediction. Your language makes a difference. And I'm going to bet for many students in your classroom that you are actually the highest language example they have in their life. Just like you raised your own children and gave them the gift of your language by using it, and they would constantly say, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? And you tell them. That's what you're doing in the classroom. And so you are utilizing, and I would just point out that Newman and Wright have written some of the best books. And then in the resources at the end, you'll find the names of their books. Susan Newman. That you should use words that are not commonly words frequently in your dialogue. Few examples. So maybe we are sitting down talking about the weather. The meteorologist today said it would be cold with no snow. The weatherman, the meteorologist, said today that it would be very cold with no snow. That's a good Ohio example. Or we're reading a book and I say the illustrator, the person who drew the pictures, used detailed drawings to describe the information and facts in the book. And so just being conscious of using high vocabulary with your students. Now, let me introduce to you the biggest concept today. And that concept is fast mapping. So in your curriculum materials, every one of the reading programs you have, or science or social studies, has routines for teaching vocabulary. And some detailed ones that come from research such as that done by Isabel Beck and Margaret McCowan, where you introduce the word and you introduce the definition and you give examples. But I want to talk to you about fast mapping. Now, let me just put this in context. If you were a parent, you've done fast mapping. So one day I was in a car going from Portland, Oregon to the coast with my goddaughter and her family. I'm not a mother, but I have many adopted families. So we are in the car. And at that moment, a number of years ago, there were 2 children in the car. They now have 3 children. One of them is now graduating from high school this year. But they, at that time, were 3 and 5, and Lucas and Maya. So we're driving, and I'm sitting in the front seat with Sean. Sean has a doctorate in literacy. So we have lots to talk about. We're talking back and forth, back and forth. And every once in a while, Lucas would say, what does that mean? What does that mean? And Maya would say, what does that mean? What does that mean? And Sean, or Sylvia the mama, simply gave a short explanation, not a lengthy Isabel Beck vocabulary lesson, but just a short explanation. And this is what we do that gets the very fast growth in students' vocabulary as preschoolers, is we simply are constantly saying, answering, what does that mean? This is what it means. What does that mean? This is what it means. Fast mapping, where we give a little explanation of a lot of words, a little explanation of a lot of words. Now that explanation might be where I directly tell the students the meaning of the word. And so let's say I give this direction. Don't procrastinate on your assignment. Procrastinate means to put off doing something. Now you say, well, that's not going to lead to mastery. But the seed is planted. Have you ever noticed when a unique word has entered your memory that it appears to be ubiquitous everywhere? So I'm going to use the highest word here. I'm hoping those 5th graders don't procrastinate on their assignment, and I'm going to tell them the meaning of the word. I'm not expecting mastery, but then 2 weeks later, we're writing a paper, and again, we can't procrastinate. We can't put it off. We've got to start it on it today. So you'll, from your own natural language, will have opportunities to reinforce that. Or we could just pair the unknown word with a synonym or a short definition. So an example, everyone, what is your hypothesis, your best guess? So I'm saying to myself, my fourth graders may not know hypothesis, so I'm going to pair it with best guess to ensure comprehension. So let's just do a few more examples. Let's say I was reading directions. We're going to determine what answer is correct. And I say to myself, they may not be firm on determine. I'm going to slip in a little fast mapping and give them an idea. We're going to decide what answer is correct. Or one day I gave these directions. We read them. Identify and circle the words that have the same vowel sound as in late. And so as I read it, I said, identify. Identify means to find out. And circle the vowels that have the same vowel sound as in late. So we're going to find, identify, and circle them. So I'm not going to commit a suicide. I'm not going to assume that everybody knows identify. So I'm going to just do fast mapping and intentionally lay in that meaning. Or maybe I'm in a fifth grade and we are reading text and the national government regulates trade between countries. And I might say, stop. And the national government regulates, has rules about the trade between countries. Well, just so we're going to use higher vocabulary and we are going to fast map, not with intention that they would necessarily master it at that moment, but the seed is planted. They're hearing the words. And once you've heard the words, then you're more aware when it occurs in your environment. Just watch yourself. Even the word ubiquitous, I never remember so well. About a few years ago, I had read ubiquitous, and I wasn't certain of the meaning exactly in this context. So I looked it up and I said, okay, ubiquitous, everywhere. And then it was everywhere. Everywhere I looked, it was ubiquitous, ubiquitous, ubiquitous. So next, and you're doing really well on this because I know from your coordinating team that you've been working on using academic terms, academic language. But again, this needs to be, even though it occurs incidentally, it needs to be an intentional response. So if we use the example of top number and bottom number, which we might use once, but then we're going to teach them the language for it, numerator and denominator. Or maybe we're reading a story. We're reading a story called a narrative, and we're going to attend to the sequence of events, which is the plot. Or I'm a music teacher and I want it louder. Let's hear a crescendo. I want it quieter, a decrescendo. I was in an art class where the teacher said, we're going to make a mixture of color and white. The term for it is tint. I didn't know that. I mean, I was sort of familiar with the word tint, but didn't know it had a precise definition in art, mixture of color with white. But our PE teacher, everybody gets to teach vocabulary, everybody. So it could say, this is going to make it so your move will be easier, or could talk about flexibility. Academic terms, fast mapping, academic terms, high quality language, read alouds. I already told you why they are so important, and it's the higher level vocabulary in read alouds. And so we're going to watch a video on read alouds, and you're going to have a job. So on that note paper, write down the first letter of your name. Like Susan, writing down an S. Loretta's writing down an L. Lisa's writing down an L. Okay? Because you're going to have different jobs based on your first name. Okay, and first, if your name is A through L, you are going to watch this video where I'm doing a read aloud. I'm reading the book Woof to second graders. I must have a thing for second grade because I wrote down all the videos we've watched. We watched 3 videos up to now with second grade. But we also watched 4th grade. We also watched 5th grade. So it's not just second, but they have 3. So if your first name starts with A through L, as you watch the video, you're going to write down any high leverage instructional practices used by the teacher. Now, we have been talking for many weeks about high leverage practices. Does the teacher break down the content? Does the teacher just focus on critical content? Little review. Does the teacher, in terms of design, have organized, focused lessons? Does the teacher tell the students the goal of the lesson? Does the teacher have review of what is needed in this lesson? Does the teacher have maybe I do it, we do it, you do it? Delivery, those, the one we've used the last 2 times. Does the teacher have opportunities to respond? Does the teacher monitor and listen carefully to their responses? Does the teacher give feedback to the students? And is there a perky pace? So those are the kind of things you're looking for. And you're going to make notes on your paper so that when I call on you, you can tell one of the highest leverage instructional practices that you noted. All right, but if you are M to Z, this is your job. We've had the concept of fast mapping. Now, in this book, as I read it, there are many times when the students, the group I was teaching, might not know the meaning of a word. And so I had to give them infuse a little definition or synonym to support their comprehension. Now, I'm going to give you a hint because one of the things that I train teachers who are reading books to students to do as they are reading, let me just, that they would be reading along, but then turn their body away from the book if they're going to add a little definition. Why do I do that? Well, one day I am reading with a group of students that were 3rd graders, and I was showing the picture and I was giving some little explanations as we went, fast mapping, and a boy raised his hand. He said, "That is not in the book." So my augmentations, what I was adding to it, he had read the story before with his parents and he knew that that was not there. So now I tell children, sometimes we have words that you maybe have not mastered yet the meaning of, and I'm just going to, when it happens, turn my body away from the book and then you'll know, oh, she's adding something. She's giving us an idea of the meaning of the word. So that'll be your cue. But here's your job. You're going to write down any words that I've added. Okay, so we have different jobs, but there is a 3rd job. This is for our collaborative team. If your name is there, you know who you are. So you are going to tally the opportunities to respond. And I'll indicate when it's 10 minutes so that you will be able to easily figure out the opportunities to respond. We'll go to 14 minutes, but you'll be able to figure that out. Do you have your job? Okay, check it out because I'll be calling on you to give some data based on your job. Okay, so all I need to do is pull up the video and we will be good. Okay, I need my friend, and she already did it. Loretta said, Archer, we're on. You are either writing down glows, good practices. You are writing down words that are fast mapped to support the students in reading the read aloud, or you're doing opportunities to respond. All right.
Well, today I get to read you my favorite book. And all of you are in a reading group, and this is about reading. And the title is Wolf! Exclamation mark. What's this word, everyone? Wolf. And here is the cover. Now, I want you to take a minute and look at the cover because you're going to tell your partner what you think the story is about. So looking it over, don't say. Okay, whisper to your partner what you think the story is going to be about. Okay, looking back up here. So you have some good hypotheses, some good guesses, and you are thinking this story is going to be about? It's going to be about a wolf reading a story. And put yourself up nice and low if you had a different idea. And you were thinking it's going to be about? The same. Anybody has a different idea? And you were thinking? So you think it could be about some wolves and some eating some pigs, like some other stories about wolf and pigs? That would be good. Anybody else? Yes. So the wolf is telling a story to make them happy. Well, this is a wonderful story about Becky Bloom. So let's see what happens in the story. Now, after walking for many days, a wolf wandered. He came into a little quiet town, and he was tired and hungry, and his feet ached. They really, really hurt. And he had only a little money that was for emergencies when everything was bad. Now, he remembered there's a farm outside of this village, outside of this little town. I'll find some food there. So twos, tell your partner what you think the wolf is going to do. Twos, tell your partner what you think the wolf is going to do. Excellent. Good. Put your thumb up if you have a good idea. So what are you predicting that the wolf is going to do? He's going to go to the farm and eat the pigs. We'll see if that comes true. Put your thumb up if you had a different prediction. You were thinking he's going to go to the farm and read a story like he did on the cover. Well, let's see which of those might be true. Did he eat the pigs or did he read a story? Well, as he looked over the farm fence, he saw a pig and a duck and a cow reading in the sun. Now, the wolf had never seen animals read before. I'm so hungry. My eyes are playing tricks on me. I surely can't see animals that are reading, he said to himself. But he was really very hungry and didn't stop to think about it for long. The wolf stood up and he took a deep breath. And let's see what he did. Think about what you think he's going to do. And he leaped at the animals with a howl. Ah-woo! 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 Now the chickens and the rabbits ran for their life. But the duck, the pig, and the cow didn't budge. They didn't move at all. What is that awful, terrible noise? Complained the cow, said the cow. I can't concentrate on my book. I can't think about what's in my book. Just ignore it. Don't pay any attention to it, said the duck. Now I want you to think, if all of these animals ignored, didn't pay any attention to the wolf, what might the wolf do? Think for a minute. Okay, tell your partner what the wolf might do when they ignored him. Go. Okay, looking up here. Now, you got to be thinking, what would a wolf normally do if these animals totally ignored him? Put your thumb up if you have an idea. And you're thinking he might?
Because they're ignoring
Him. Yes, ignoring him.
and he's gonna eat them.
He might eat them because they're ignoring him. That's a very good idea. Absolutely. Put your thumb up if you had a different idea. You were thinking.
I was thinking that he's gonna read with them because they're annoying him, and then
So they're kind of annoying him, so he's going to join him and read with them.
when they're not looking, he's gonna jump out.
He is going to be so sneaky. So he's going to pretend and read with them. And then they're not looking, paying attention. He's so annoyed, good use of words, he's going to eat them. Well, let's see if any of that happens. Well, the wolf did not like to be ignored. What's wrong with you? Growled the wolf. Can't you see I'm a big and dangerous wolf? I'm sure you are, said the pig. But couldn't you be big and dangerous somewhere else? We're trying to read. This is a farm for educated animals, animals that can read and write. Well, now be a good wolf and go away, said the pig, giving him a big push.
And then he's right in his
Now, I know, look at what happened. Now tell your partner what a wolf might usually do when given a big push. Tell your partner what he usually do, give it a big push. Yes, excellent. Looking up here, you said, well, I think the wolf would. Push them back. That might be very wolf behavior. Nice and low like this shows we got an answer. Yes, what he might do. He might eat them. And last idea, he might get angry. Well, let's see. Now, the wolf had never been treated like this before. Educated animals, the wolf repeated, said again and again to himself. This is something new. Well, then I'll learn how to read too. And off he went to school. Now, the children found it strange to have a wolf in the class, but since he didn't try to eat anyone, they soon got used to him. The wolf was serious. He really wanted to learn to read, and hardworking, he'd practice a lot. And after much effort, after much trying, he learned to read and write. Soon he was the best in the class. Now, where do you think he might go back to, everyone? The farm. Let's see. There he is. Quite satisfied, feeling really good about himself. The wolf went back to the farm and jumped over the fence. I'll show them, he thought, and he opened his book and he began to read. Run, wolf, run. See, wolf, run. Run, wolf, run. See, wolf, run. You've got a long way to go, said the duck, without even bothering, without even looking up. And the pig and the duck and the cow went on reading their own books, not the least impressed. They did not think he was very good. So tell your partner where you think the wolf is off to now. Talk it over with your partner. Okay, excellent. So looking up here, put your thumb up if you have an idea. So where is he headed? Where do you think? To school. Raise your hand if you're thinking he's going back to school. Okay, but some of you had different ideas. Put your thumb up if you had a different idea of where he's going. I heard that you said he was going to school, but he was going to read harder books so he would be better. Well, let's see what he does. Well, the wolf jumped back over the fence and ran straight to the public library. And he studied long and hard. He read a lot of dusty old books, and he practiced and he practiced and he practiced until he could read without stopping. They'll be impressed with my reading now. They'll think I'm really good, he said to himself. Of course, where's he headed, everyone?
10
Back
minutes.
to the farm. The wolf walked up to the farm gate and knocked. Knock, 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 knock. And he opened the 3 little pigs. And he began to read. Once upon a time, there were 3 little pigs that one pond and their mother told her to have. Stop that racket, stop that noise, interrupted the duck, said the duck. You have improved. You have gotten better, remarked the pig, said the pig, but you still need to work on your style. The wolf tucked his tail between his legs and slumped away. Tell your partner where he's going to learn how to read better. Okay, so looking up here, he is, look, everybody eyes here. You think he is going? He's going.
Okay, we're going to stop right there, and you'll have to read the book to hear the ending. So we have 3 types of data. First, I will tell you, I have learned a lot since I did this video. For example, if I was going to improve upon it, one thing I would do is give them sentence starters so that they would have verbal sentences, which really was not in the research at that time as much as it is now. That would have been a big improvement. But I did extraordinarily well with our topic of the day, which is fast mapping. And so our first goal was to, let's just leave this, not leave meeting. And
Dr. Archer, we have
Yes.
a question.
Yes.
What kind of sentence starters might you have used?
Listen, where do you think the wolf will go now? Think about it. I would have been sure to give them time to prepare. And then I would say, tell your partner and start by saying, I think the wolf will go too. So we'd end up with higher language in these sentences that they gave me and said to their partner, but giving them thinking time for their answer, then giving them the verbal support with a sentence starter that would support their answer. Okay, is that good? I mean, that's what I would do. Okay, Loretta, can you see the PowerPoint again? Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, so if you wrote down high leverage instructional practices, would you now, no one else is putting something into the chat box, but you are, would you enter to the chat box what you thought was a high leverage instructional practice? All right, I'm going to slip into the chat box and see what you have. And you know, every time we have done this, I have been extraordinarily impressed by your skills at looking at instruction. I'm sure I will be now. Let's just zip it up to the top and we'll hit a few of these. So multiple and varied opportunities to respond. Alan said frequent responses. Colleen said opportunities to respond. We know how important that is. And Lee said turn and talk. Jenna said frequent checks for understanding with a discussion, having thumbs up so that shows the students were ready. Turn and talk, having them share with their partners, excellent. Using choral responses, where are they going? To the farm. And so it was an example of getting, even as we read books, some people say, read the book all the way through with no responses or questions. That's not supported by research. Research said the students learned more by having certain junctures where you stopped and you gave feedback. Very much would be in concert with what we do in reading. We're reading a portion of it. We stop and we respond and get feedback on our answers. The students made some predictions and said there was think time. You know, one time, and I didn't give them enough preparation time, and the answer was not as strong as the previous answers. Oh, darn, Archer, you always get feedback on your teaching. So yes, this was an example of think, pair, share. And Lisa also said there was active participation. Gretchen said many opportunities to respond, turn and talk, and thumbs up. Excellent. So the next question was, were there any words that I used fast mapping? And if you were to look at this book, you would find that words were underlined in light pencil that I wanted to give a little explanation. So I had to prepare for it. I wrote down 22 times in that 10 minutes that I gave them a little explanation of words I thought they might not know. So if you wrote down words, check yours off to see if you have some of these. Hypotheses, wandered, ached, emergencies, village, peered, tricks, budge, complaint, concentrate, ignore, ignored, replied, educated, serious, hardworking, effort, satisfied, bothering, impressed, racket, and slumped. It did not in any way take away from the story. All I was doing was augmenting the story to ensure that they would have comprehension. Now, maybe you figured out the number of opportunities to respond. And so if you have that number, would you pop it in? Well, let me just call on a few people. Laura, what did you have? Opportunities to respond. So Laura, Kimberly, Loretta, Becky, Michelle, and Tabitha, open up your mic so I can call on you. Okay, Loretta, what did you have? Okay.
Okay, so it wasn't working. I had 37.
You had 37, so that is almost 4 responses per minute. Michelle, what did you have?
32.
32. Notice that both of you had, you know, when you read the research, they constantly say for quick responses, 3 to 5, but they always go back to 3, 3, 3. Let's see, Becky, what do you have?
I had 32 as well.
Well, then we're just going to say it's 32, 3.2 responses per minute, right where we'd want it to be. Yay. All right. Fast mapping. Fast mapping can be done all through the day. It is flooding children with vocabulary. Look at the number of words that I'm not certain all those second graders knew, but at least they've been introduced to it. The seed has been planted, their consciousness is raised, they're more likely to attend the next time they hear that word. Of course, we also know that reading read alouds more than one time is useful in the primary grades. Well, so I wrote down what I thought were the practices that were useful, as if I was watching another teacher teach. A teacher was prepared, has pre-read the story, underlined words for fast mapping. The pace was perky, it moved along. The teacher was passionate, just like you are, passionate about student learning, passionate about the topic, passionate about this read aloud, many positive comments, but a positive environment. And I used a routine that was very similar to if we were reading instructional materials, where I introduced the title of the book, we examined the cover, and then we used read, stop, respond. I read a portion of it, we stopped and ask questions, and they respond. This is exactly what we're going to see when we do comprehension. We read a paragraph, we stop, and we respond. We read a paragraph, we stop and respond. Read, stop, respond. And there were opportunities to respond. Now, there was choral responses, the farm, they did that together. There was individual responses when they indicated that they had an answer and I randomly called on them. And so it was predominantly non-volunteers. One of the things I wanted you to notice is I gave them preparation time, but notice that I also was thinking about the answer and modeling what I wanted them to do, which was to think. And then they shared answers with the partner. Now, one polish, I'd tell this teacher, it would be better to have partners that were labeled like A and B or 1 and 2, so one student didn't always dominate the partnership. But I asked a question, I gave them time to prepare their answer, they shared it with their partner, and I circulated and monitored as best I could in that setting, and then called on individuals. Okay, and most importantly, I used fast mapping to facilitate vocabulary gains and to support their comprehension. 22 times I gave them a little definition of a word. Now, we have just a little time left, and I'm going to actually look at this segment, and we're going to have to pick up on the last big idea, which is inside outside, next time when we return. We always have too much to cover. But here's the biggest move in terms of K1, 2, and 3 in terms of read alouds. And that is a movement to have at least half of all primary read alouds be informative. Because we need to not only use them for background, for vocabulary, as I did in that video, but it was narrative. I'd still do some narratives with kids. That's a great book about reading. But I want to also stuff the children with background knowledge, stuff them. And that means we have to read informational text and have read alouds that are informational text. So now I'm following this research pretty carefully that would say, let's have at least half of all the books we're going to read be informational. Because it increases background knowledge as well as vocabulary. I want to get these kids, their brains filled with knowledge networks, And also I want to give them the structure of informative text and spark their curiosity. You know, curiosity is born out of knowing something. The seed of curiosity is knowledge. The seed of curiosity is knowledge. Have you ever noticed that in your own life? You don't just randomly say, I think today it's going to be DNA day. Yeah, I'm going to read about DNA. No. You read an article, and the article is about, let's say, schizophrenia, what we recently learned about schizophrenia, which means that it appears that the DNA potential for schizophrenia is within individuals. And somehow it is triggered between 17 and 21 years of age. Now I am curious. I want to follow up on that. Just yesterday, I was going on a walk with a friend to Starbucks. And I said, did you hear that data that was on the amount of emissions from gas mowers and air blowers? He said, no, I hadn't heard about that. I said, well, it amazed me that if you had a car that drove from Miami to Juneau, Alaska, all the way, its emissions on that trip would be less than 30 minutes using a glass blower. And he said, oh my God, I've got to research that. Really? So we both researched it. Our curiosity came from knowledge. So that's why I want to use, one of the reasons, informational text with students. And it also helps them particularly to understand other people. And it complements fiction. So here's the best person who does this work. And I already mentioned her name, Susan Newman. And she's suggesting that we use knowledge networks, that we create knowledge networks by reading many, many, many read alouds on the same topic. So that's what I did. I sat down with first grade and I said, tell me some of the topics you would like students to have big knowledge on, be experts on. And one of them they listed was the area of birds. So here's what we did. They selected that topic and the big ideas that they wanted them to know about birds. For example, birds have feathers, birds have beaks, and most, but not all, birds fly. So we listed the big ideas. And then we went to the librarian and said, show us all of your bird books. It was in a small community, so we also went to the public library. Show us all your bird books. And we selected some that were narrative. For example, there was a narrative book here, a story about a parrot. Let's see, buried under here. Yes, it's the very last book. Alex the Parrot, which we read last. After we got the whole group and picked out the best ones, then this one we decided to do at the end because you had to have some bird knowledge before you'd understand this book. Most of them were informational text. And so we had a book on owls. That's my favorite because I have an owl in my backyard. But we decided the first informational book we'd go with is this one. I wonder, because it starts by telling you information about birds. Birds have feathers and a beak and wings and 2 legs and 1 or more songs. They lay eggs and warm blood. But I learned something I didn't know when we read this book, and it talked about how do chicks get out of their shells. Many baby chicks have a special egg tooth to help them peck their way out of their shells. The egg tooth, which is only a tooth a bird ever has, falls off soon after the little chick has hatched. Did you know that? Wow. The kids couldn't wait to tell their parents about the bird had a tooth, their only tooth they'd ever get, and it's gone when they get out of the shell. Oh gosh. And then we looked at the singular books that we were going to use, and we put them in order from ones they might have the most background knowledge on, to the next eagles, to the next tropical birds, and owls, and 2 books on owls. Then we picked words that we were going to teach in each book and practice and review, so that the students would end up, these are the books for, if you look at Susan Newman's work, and she did one on insects, and these were the books that were chosen for that. And some were fiction and some were informational books. So, but when you go to pick an informational book, you want to be certain that it is above the student's current reading level, designed to develop language, written in informative fashion. Lots of informative books for young children are written in a narrative fashion, and I wouldn't use those. I would pick ones that are written as informative materials usually are organized. And the content has to be accurate, it has to be well written, and enhanced by graphics. And did I use performance-oriented reading? Absolutely. Studies show that how you read it makes a difference. And even as you read it, you want to give a little explanation. And you want to ask questions so the kids are involved. And in narrative, you might ask retell or prediction questions. If it is informational text, you've got this coming so you can read it in more detail. If it is informative, you want to ask who or what the paragraph is about, and tell me one thing about the who or what. Topic, details, topic, details. Well, I'm going to end here with showing you how you might do an informational text. My OWL book. And the day I read this to children, I had read the book and I had actually decided what parts of it I'm going to read. And after we read it, I asked them for each segment that we read, what is the topic of this page or this paragraph? And what did it tell us about that topic? All right, so you're going to be my students, so say the answers out loud. I'm stopping and recording them. I will record them and pull it up there. Okay, so I gave you the pictures, okay? So we're going to read an OWL book, and the title of the book is Owls. Say the title, everyone. Owls. Who's who? Owls are found everywhere on Earth except in polar regions. At that moment, I showed them a globe. The North Pole and the South Pole, no owls. Everywhere else, owls. From deserts to forests to tundra, there's at least one type of owl for every habitat. Say the word, habitat. Every place they live, there's, except in the poles, there is one type of owl, at least. So this talked about their habitats. And think to yourself, what have we learned about owls' habitats? Thinking? You're going to tell your partner ones, and you're going to start by saying, we learned this about owls' habitats. Say it. We learned this about owls' habitats. They said it to their partner. I called on them. One child said, we learned this about owls' habitats. They don't live in polar regions. Call on the next child. We learned this about owls' habitats. They are everywhere. Let's learn about them as birds. Like all birds, owls have feathers, hollow bones, and their young hatch from eggs. So think, what did we learn about owls? Okay, twos, tell your partner and say, here's one thing I learned about owls, and then say what you learned. Here's one thing that I learned about owls. And they shared, and one child they called on said, one thing I learned about owls is they have feathers like all other birds. Next child, here's one thing I learned about owls. They have hollow bones. Next child, here's one thing I learned about owls. Their young hatch from eggs. Well, I don't have the chance to read you the whole book, but you'd be like fascinated. Yes, you would, because their feathers are fluffy and gray and brown, and they create camouflage. So I wrote these down, and they don't have ears. No, no, no. They have tufts, and those tufts tell how they're feeling. If they're at the they're not ears, they're just feathers, and they get upset. They stand up, and they go that direction. And basically they say, don't come near me. And then we learned about their eyes. They have enormous eyes. And they can see better in poor light than humans. And their eyes are fixed. They don't change direction. So they have to move their neck around. And they can make it almost all the way around. Oh my God. And they're farsighted. They can see far away, but not close up. In fact, the book tells us that most owls are so farsighted, they can't even see things nearby, like their feet. And we learn about their ears. They do not have ears like we do. They have slits. But here's the interesting thing. Many of them have a larger slit higher up than lower. So they have two slits, but they're not the same length and the same height. What does that do? It allows them to hone in on in the dark at night on the exact location of a little mouse poop that they're going to get. Wow. Now, don't you want to know more about owls? Well, we're going to read about owls, but we're going to learn about birds. We're going to, the actual day I taught this, I was writing down the details and making basically a web of knowledge, a knowledge network with owls in the middle and these big topics all the way around it with the details. And we ended up, we put an owl picture on it. We put it up on the board, or on the board with what we had learned about birds. And we did it for owls, and we did it for ducks, and we did it for eagles. The kids were experts by the time but they all went home and wanted to tell their parents what they had learned. Did you know that owls' eyes do not move? They have to move their head all the way around in order to see, and they can't even see their feet because they can only see far away. Oh my gosh, the kids loved it. Well, if you wanted to investigate, you might check out Susan Newman's World of Words. And I know we've gone over a moment. I always have too much to tell you about, but let's have some big ideas. And we can go right, this one we're going to pick up next time because it's critical. So the biggest ideas, let me just pop up here that we've already hit on vocabulary. And the biggest ideas today, when we look at all the ways that we can make a difference. I should have written down the number for this. You're very sweet to hang in there. Is that we could use high quality language. Put up a sign for you. Words, words, words. Something to remind you. College words. High quality vocabulary. And we're going to use academic language and use read alouds. But the term I want you really to capture is fast mapping. Well, until next time, let's flood the children with vocabulary. Flood the children with vocabulary and intentionally, though incidentally, work on fast mapping. So I think that we went over a few minutes. Oh. Yes, Loretta? Yes, we did. So I'm going to say goodbye to all of you. Next time we'll pick up here, but we will do explicit instruction and we will do word learning strategies. My favorite, inside, outside, is the one we'll go over, as well as morphology in the upper grades. All right. Have a very good fall day, and I'll see you when we return. If you're an administrator or one of the team members, stay on for conversation.